Calaveras County. Welcome to Inside View. I'm your guest host, Mike Taylor. Now let's talk Calaveras County government. My guest this time around is Ben Stopper, the District 5 Supervisor. Thanks for being here, Ben.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
You bet. Now, we were talking just before we started filming, and you've had a steep learning curve over the past, 7-8 months or so?
Yes, sir.
How's it been going?
You know, it's been a pleasure serving the community. It's been a concentrating learning experience consistently. I appreciate it. I've had a lot of good support from staff, and also there's been a few courses prior to me being elected that I took that helped me get my feet under me. And so let's dive right in. I want to ask you, and this may be an issue we bounce around a little bit, but the general plan. I've been in the county long enough to know that we haven't had a general plan in so long, people didn't know we ever had one, it feels like. Now, you guys are getting on the cusp of getting one approved. How is that going? It's going very well, sir. You know, we've been working on it for about 20 years now.
Yeah.
I mean, we're on the verge of finishing it. We've thoroughly vetted it through the Planning Commission. It's been presented to the Board of Supervisors. There's been certain changes made to the general plan through the Planning Commission and the supervisors that do need to be vetted through environmental impact to make sure that the substantial changes have not changed it to the point where we would need to send it back. But we have a very good planning director that's done a lot of good work, and this is not his first rodeo. So it's looking very promising, and it should be back before the Board of Supervisors within so many months. I mean, depending on how substantial those changes were that were made.
How do you feel the sort of community support? Because I know, you know, and I'm sorry, I kind of slipped into constituent mode there a little bit. You know, how long can they possibly wrestle this thing around? And so it's wonderful to see it kind of almost gelling together. What do you feel has been the community's kind of response to that? Is everybody ready for it to go, or are there still some rocky waters that got to be ironed out?
There's always going to be some rocky waters because, you know, there's two polar opposites in the community, and then there's people that are kind of in the middle, and there's different ways of looking at a general plan and what should be in it. I think that what we have here is a substantial compromise that's come forward, so I think both sides are not 100% happy with it necessarily. I mean, there's people that talk about land use rights, and there should be more land use rights in there, and then there's the other side that are like, well, my land use rights also includes me living on my property without somebody making too much noise next door at the same time. So I deserve to live on my property the way I choose also. So, you know, there's issues, there's multiple ways to look at it. I think that what is before us is a substantial compromise. I think that we've scaled back the amount of population that was in it 5 to 10 years ago.
Kind of projected, huh?
Yeah, projected population.
And maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but it sort of feels like we had to kind of recalculate everything after the Butte fire. I mean, this county, folks didn't know what to do, and folks haven't exactly gotten to rebuild yet either, even.
Oh, absolutely.
So those population numbers started feeling pretty high pretty quick, didn't they?
I think those felt pretty high after the recession.
Yeah, that's true too.
The housing community was really building strong prior to the recession, 2007, 2008. And after that happened, you know, we hit a plateau where there's no building permits for the most part pulled for years. So, you know, the Butte fire did, you know, have a substantial impact on how we view things. Also, the recession did. And at that point, you know, I think originally it was around 120,000 people in the next 30 years.
Yeah.
Where are we at? 45,000 right now.
About 45, yeah.
And you know, that's you know, we've reeled that back substantially, and I think that's a good compromise in how we look forward. And we always have the opportunity to revisit it, and it's something that I have advocated for throughout the process. I was on the Planning Commission in 2016 also, so I was working through the process then. But we need to continually revisit this so that we can make changes, because the community is fluid. It's not always going to be this is the way it's going to be in the future. So we need to keep an open mind and make it so that we can revisit it and make the changes needed as the community changes moving forward.
And you brought up a point that I was just going to bring up, is that you can always revisit it. And so I think it's a matter now of us kind of getting that document on the books, so to speak, and then we can kind of move forward from there. And
yes, I mean we do need to vet it properly. I mean we can't just pass something that we don't have substantial findings to back it up. So that's part of the process, and that's part of the reason it's been held up for so long.
Yeah,
and also the board changes frequently, and as the board changes, the mindset of what our future looks with the community changes also. So I think that finishing it is important, and be able to take a look at it and board giving direction in the future so that we can make it a fluid document, just like the world is.
Yeah, that's right. Well, from general plan to the other side of that coin, literally, the county budget. How are we doing? It's 1 week it sounds like we're doing okay, and then we hear that we still haven't gotten most of the money that the county was out because of the Butte fire, and it just seems a little shocking that we're almost 4 years later and we haven't quite gotten all those dollars back in our coffers. So how are we doing budget-wise?
Well, we're balanced. Let me go back to last fiscal year, because this kind of, looking back on what we've done in the past, we, as we're working forward, we're expending money to take care of these disasters. It's not just the Butte fire. There's the 2017 winter storms.
Yeah, that's right.
And even this last winter, we had some disasters that we would get money back after we do the work. So there's a substantial amount of money that we need to put forward up front.
Yeah.
And when they build a budget, the last year's fiscal budget, as the 18-19 fiscal year, they had showed that, look, we're spending this much money on these disasters. At the same time, we're saying we're going to get this revenue in. Well, until we finish the work and we do the proper paperwork and we file it, it's called closing it out.
Yeah.
That we don't get the money back. And even after we close it out, it could be 1 month, 9 months, a year before FEMA or the state decides that we're entitled to receive that money and they give it to us. So in the past, they've showed that revenue that it was coming in.
Oh, okay.
And I think that we're providing some transparency now in the fact that, look, we understand we're doing the work, we're trying to close these books out, which a lot of the stuff hasn't been closed out from the Butte fire, and the work's been done for years. So we put people in the position to finish the work. We're providing transparency. Look, we understand that we should get a majority of this money back as long as everything's done properly, but we don't know when we'll receive it. So we can't count it as revenue in this fiscal year until then. So it does look worse on the books, showing that we don't know if we're getting that money. But at the same time, we're saying we're covering these disasters, and as the money comes in the future, then it's going into the budget. There's multiple ways of looking at it, but if you put down revenue that you don't necessarily realize, then officially we aren't being transparent about what's happening during this fiscal year.
It's a little bit of a, I don't want to suggest bait and switch, but it's a little bit of a, wait a minute, wasn't that money supposed to be in there? And I can totally understand that, and that makes perfect sense to me, that you would not budget on money that you don't know when you're going to get it.
Yes, sir.
That's always been something that I've advocated for in this state, is that if schools have to budget for this year and the next 2 years, why don't governments have to do the same. It would seem like you would, and I know everyone in the auditor's office would be scratching their head and saying, no, please no. But it would just seem like everyone would then have a better mindset on, okay, here's what's coming down the road, and it looks like next year is going to be a tough one kind of thing. So,
well, it goes hand in hand with we're being open about, we realize this work hasn't been done. We want this certain area, right now it's administration, to move forward on and getting these funds and closing the books out.
Yeah.
So now we got to start holding them accountable to getting the job done. Because if they don't get it done, we won't receive funds that we haven't received, let's say since 2000. The Butte fires in 2015.
Yeah.
The work was done in 2016.
17. Yeah.
And we haven't realized it for 3 years. So at that point, we have to hold staff accountable to get the work done that's needed to realize those funds.
Yeah, okay. And again, on the income side or the revenue side, cannabis cultivation has come back to the county. And I know I was just reading some stuff today, and you've kind of put forth the idea of having, well, you tell me, the commission or the panel that you've suggested that the county put together.
There's multiple names for it, but one we could call it is like a cannabis control department. So I'm not the first one to come up with this idea.
Yeah.
It's been presented in the past, and multiple other counties are actually facilitating the use of one. This would be like a one-stop shop, for instance. Now, everything can't be processed through there, but you move everything in there to streamline the process, because each department, as the county stands, already has their responsibilities. With the sheriff, it's law enforcement and enforcing the law. Typically that runs with the, talking to the sheriff. That's 99% of the time his job is to work with illegal grows. Well, with the introduction of a cannabis ordinance, these would be legal. And at that point, we would move forward with a team that we could call it a white coat team that would go out. And I like to use the example of when I build my house, I have a building inspector come out and do a building inspection. I don't call the sheriff or code compliance to come out, because they come out after I've already done something wrong. So we're putting somebody in the mindset with a checklist. These are the things that you need to do. You go down the checklist.
Sure.
You miss this, you have 10 days to fix it, or we're calling code compliance, and they're going to come out to serve you with an abatement notice if you don't follow the standards that are set forth by the law.
Yeah, okay. And would that department, for lack of a better word right now, I understand that it hasn't even been created yet, but would that department kind of pay for itself with both the tax revenues and the permitting fees and whatnot that would come in?
Ultimately, with your permitting fees, as per Prop 26 with the state, that money comes in with their permit fees. That's by state law is to be used to help facilitate the permitting process and them moving forward with that. So the idea behind it, and when you put together a fee study that justifies the fee, that would be included within the fee study. And right now, with a fee study, we've had multiple departments say, this is what we need to do this type of work. So at that point, we say, okay, we can condense those ideas from those different departments into the cannabis control department and use the fees from the permitting to move forward.
To accomplish that work.
To accomplish that. And then I think after that, the taxes may roll in a year later. The Measure C taxes, as they're structured, I don't believe it will be for canopy anymore. It will be by weight. And at that point, we can start giving the sheriff more money, or to start doing more law enforcement, because that would be general fund money.
Sure.
So I would foresee the cannabis department, so to say, to be supported by permit fees. and hopefully at that point it would be sustainable strictly on those, and
Okay.
you know, through the years, and then there will be renewal fees in the future, and I think the work would be less. So the first year or two,
Yeah.
there would be some temps in place, and you would probably need to scale the department back if the number of total grows allowed in the counties always stayed static.
Yeah. And as for a proposed ordinance coming through, how is that making it through the process? Where do we kind of stand on that time-wise if we're here now toward the end of September? Is this something that may be completed by the beginning of the new year?
I think that we're meeting October 1st, and we'll be hearing it before the board. It's been
Okay.
through the Planning Commission. I believe they had 3 meetings, and so it's been vetted through the Planning Commission. It will be presented to us. There's 2 timelines after the board approves it. There's 30 days before it's into law, but also with a fee study is 60 days after the approval.
Oh, okay.
So I'm thinking, let's just be optimistic. If we were to pass it next week, which
Yeah.
I'm highly doubtful, because there
Yeah.
may be changes. We'd have to bring it back to the board again. But by the new year, optimistically,
Maybe
it could be.
something's going. Okay, okay. And what do you see for the county for that? I mean, is this a lot of smaller grows, or is this, a few larger grows? I guess is because I've lost track of sort of where that overall mindset is now.
Right. Well, with the study session at the beginning of the year, where we laid the base of what is proposed, mind you, this is all proposed so
Sure.
far. So until the board votes in its entirety,
Yeah.
it is only a thought until then.
Yeah.
We scaled it back to people that were in compliance with the urgency ordinance and had state temp licensure, which brought it back to approximately 190 people.
Okay.
If we recall with the UO, there was well over 700 people that
Yeah.
applied for commercial grows.
Yeah.
So we're scaling it back, by 2/3, essentially 33% approximately, give or take. That's a first start. And then, proposed right now, 1 acre on larger parcels. So during the UO, it was on 2-acre parcels.
Oh,
Right
okay.
now, we're discussing, 20-acre minimum parcels.
Oh, okay.
We've also taken broad steps to take it out of rural residential, so zoning. So I think it addresses the issues of bringing it into residential areas or HOAs.
Yeah.
And which was a major concern for a lot of people. It was a concern of mine prior to me being a board member. Living in Rancho Calaveras, there's a lot of 1, 2-acre, 5-acre lots within there.
Yeah.
And there was a CC&R that we didn't allow commercial businesses into that area.
Oh,
but all of a sudden,
yeah.
commercial grows were allowed into Rancho Calaveras, which kind of conflicted with the CC&Rs with the HOA during the urgency ordinance.
Yeah.
So we addressed those issues. There was legitimate concerns throughout the community of Calaveras as a whole, and we've taken broad steps to mitigate a majority of those concerns by getting it out of residential areas, HOAs, and let's say not in your face. So
Yeah.
it's not in everybody's backyard.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's, I've lived in the county long enough to understand that there's sort of the younger generation and there's the older generation. There's 2 halves to this county, really. And actually, that older generation is a much larger percentage of the population here. But it seems like folks, I don't know if they've gotten educated, but it seems like they've kind of learned to understand that this is something that's coming. And where I'm going with this was, back in the early days of even this discussion in the county, it was the stoners versus the rest of us. And it's not really stoners anymore. This is becoming a legitimate business across the country and in several states in the U.S. already, despite the fact that it's still a Schedule I drug by the federal government. And in my opinion, that's backwards, and the feds need to figure that out. But how do you see us moving forward with this? Do you think we get an ordinance in place and we end up with, say, 150 growers and we're moving along kind of copacetically and everybody's getting along?
I see that there's going to be a few that are never going to be okay with the issue,
Yeah.
and I do agree with you on the fact that people have educated themselves. During my campaign, I knocked on a lot of doors.
Oh, nice.
I say I knocked on probably 1,000 doors myself, and talking to people. It's amazing how many people are educated. At first thought,
Yeah.
you talk to people, and they're like, well, the general masses don't know what's really going on. Well, I learned different.
Oh, really?
People are paying attention.
Okay.
And there's not my backyard thing.
Yeah.
Most of the people are okay with it as long as it's not in their backyard.
Yeah.
So there are certain elements that with this emerging from the black market, it does bring with it, and we need to be very, very, understand that as we move forward.
Yeah.
That's why, all the things that the sheriff's department suggested in the background check ordinance, I was very open to after I sat down with them and the DA, and they gave their reasoning. There was 12 points originally they presented to us. They end up adding one more point the last time we heard it. So there's 13 points of different types of convictions that would be disqualifying, and we left every one of those in there. And I think the board understands that. There's a certain element that does come with this.
There's going to be bad actors in just about every play you try and stage.
Yes, sir.
And that's the sad reality, and I know that we saw that obviously when the urgency ordinance and, the second gold rush happened here.
Right.
And people came running with their hose and their plants and their clones, and we weren't ready for it. And it was kind of interesting, and I know you weren't on the board then, so we can kind of say that was then, this is now. But a lot of folks in the public were looking, going, we should have lined these ducks up a little better.
There was a land rush.
Yeah, there really
I
was.
think we're, for the most part, there'll be a small one still, but we're circumventing a majority of it. We've learned from our past mistakes. And, well, I don't like to live in the past. I like to look forward to the future, but at the same time, we need to realize our mistakes of the past and learn from them, and make adjustments as we move forward in the future. I'm not stuck in a tunnel or a box. I'm willing to go outside it, and I think we can benefit the county as a whole as long as we consider it in the way we have and move forward carefully.
Sure.
So slowly, steadily,
And surely.
and with a low number to start, and we can see how that works, and then think about whether we need to upscale it or downscale it in the future. If it's not working, then we might need to retract.
Well, that's always the way I felt about it anyway, was the board is the policy-making entity for this. If you don't want that in there, don't allow that in there, whatever that might have been. But anyway, as we're getting down to our last few minutes, I just wanted to ask you, what do you see as the most pressing issues for District 5 right now?
Well, District 5 more so is the fire insurance concerns of a lot of people that are a long ways from fire stations and everything. So there's been quite a few calls that I've gotten from constituents that have had their fire insurance dropped. And that's disconcerting because some people are getting dropped, and then they're only finding something for $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 a year, where they're making payments on insurance,
which is
$500
just
plus
crazy.
a month.
Yeah.
That's a nice car. In some cases, that's what people pay for their mortgage. Without the insurance.
That's right. Yeah.
And in long term, that fixed incomes, that's hard on people.
Very much so.
So I think addressing the issue with our local fire departments, we can see what we can do to mitigate a lot of the fire concerns and everything as we move forward. And that's a major one. Another
Yeah.
major one is I get a lot of complaints because we're in rural residential areas. And when you have rural inside that name, if there's no speed limit posted on the street, it's 55 miles an hour,
Yeah.
even in Rancho Calaveras, where you have a house every half acre or so
Yeah.
in some areas. And people are driving 55 down those roads and
Yeah.
wrecking. And
Yeah.
there's kids out there playing in the front yards. And that's based on state law. It's hard to get those laws changed. So
Yeah.
we're finding mitigating measures for that. Basically, Rancho Calaveras is the least affected. When it comes to commercial cultivation that we're proposing, along with District 5. I mean, there was, I believe, 7 grows there during the original UO.
Yeah.
Potentially 2 inside of the entire District 5
Wow.
could qualify. And
Okay.
those are significantly out there. One's on 40 plus acres and the other one's on, I believe, somewhere near 700 acres. So I think those are far enough out that we can mitigate the issues of inside our tighter knit residential areas.
Yeah. Okay. So it's fire insurance and slowing down.
They're slowing down speeders.
Well,
people reckon with these windy roads out here, and they go around a blind corner. It happens consistently, and we lose a lot of good citizens one way or the other from those type of issues.
Well, it's easy to forget driving down Baldwin Street that you're in a neighborhood.
Right.
Now if memory serves, Baldwin is posted, right?
Right,
At 45.
45.
And,
But there's side
as soon as you
streets are
turn
skinny.
off, and
Some of those don't have stop signs at four-ways.
Yeah.
So people go blow through a four-way at 55 miles an hour while someone's going the
It's
other way.
not going to be good.
No.
Well, Mr. Stopper, we're down to our last minute. I just want to ask you, how you holding up? How you doing? Are you enjoying it?
I am enjoying it. It's not easy work, but I do enjoy serving the community. I've gotten a lot of good feedback from my constituents and from the county as a whole. So
Yeah.
I've been blessed, and I've been blessed with a good family that supports me throughout this process.
That's good. And it's a, 24-hour-a-day job?
It is. It is. I'm still working my first job.
Oh,
so I'm
okay.
working 2 jobs.
Yeah.
So never a down moment.
Never a down moment.
Never a down
Are they
moment.
at least not calling you after 9 o'clock at night?
Depends on the situation.
Depends on the situation. Okay. Well, that's it. So, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here. Calaveras County's doing okay. We've got some stuff coming up that we're going to be talking about, and folks like Mr. Stopper here are doing good work for us. Ben Stopper, the District 5 Supervisor, thank you very much for being here. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Mike Taylor. Enjoy.